Joining us now is GOP presidential candidate Representative Michele Bachmann of Minnesota, a wife, mother of 5, and foster mother of 23. She is also a tax attorney and the author of the brand new book, Core of Conviction, My Story. And Representative Bachmann, it's so good to have you back here on Newsmax TV.
Thank you. It's always a thrill to be on Newsmax.
Well, you have said you are positioned for a comeback against Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney in the GOP primaries. What is your strategy going into Iowa and your path to nomination?
Well, working very hard. We worked very hard to win the Iowa straw poll. That was the most important victory so far in this election. And we're doing the same thing to be victorious on January 3rd in Iowa. And I think what people are looking at is who is the consistent core conservative in this race. And I'm that person. You'd mentioned Mitt Romney and also Newt Gingrich. If you take a look at their record and if you take a look at mine, they're completely different. I stand for building the fence on the southern border and enforcing the laws on the books, as opposed to Newt Gingrich, who's been standing for making legal 11 million illegal workers in the United States. That's a form of amnesty. You can't get away from it. Or I opposed the $700 billion TARP bailout for Washington, or for Wall Street, and they were supportive of that effort as well, and for global warming initiatives, and for also the Obamacare legislation. I was bringing 40,000 Americans to Washington to fight Obamacare, and they were advancing it. So there's all sorts of differences, and I think when people take a look at where we're at in the issues, they'll come back to the core conservative in this race, and that's me.
Now, Karl Rove recently told Newsmax that this election cycle will be vicious. All the GOP candidates have come under attacks by the media and by the Democratic National Committee, including you. Do you see the White House and President Obama creating a massive divide in the country that will damage America?
Well, he already has. This is exactly what President Obama is doing. And take a look at who he stands with. Occupy Wall Street. What does Occupy Wall Street stand for? They want other people to pay for their stuff. That's the bottom line. And one of the animating principles of America is standing on your own. And the fact that no one owes you a living. That's one of my core of convictions that I talk about in my book. President Obama is not bringing us together. That's what I will do as President of the United States. I have an ability to bring together independents and disaffected Democrats and Republicans because we've got big issues to solve. I have big ideas, and I'll take the bold actions to get the country back on track.
Now, if you don't place in the top 3 in Iowa, will you drop out of the race?
Well, we plan to win the Iowa caucus because we are very well organized. We're doing exactly what we need to do, and I intend to be the nominee to defeat Barack Obama, but more importantly, to be the next president of the United States in 2012.
Now, you and Newt Gingrich have been at odds over his recently announced immigration stance. He's been able to maintain his surge in the polls. What do you think would be Newt's greatest weakness if he were elected president?
Well, I think it's the fact that he goes with whatever is current rather than a core of conviction. I stand on principle and a core of conviction, and he has gone with whatever is current. And again, like I said, he was for the backbone of Obamacare. But I think more than anything, Newt Gingrich is the epitome of Washington, D.C., the epitome of establishment in Washington. His offices are on K Street. That's the epicenter of influence buying. He has an organization that's taken in well over $100 million to have influence on behalf of special interests in Washington, D.C. Isn't that exactly what we're trying to get away from? Crony capitalism? That's what I've been fighting when I've been in Washington, and that's the real juxtaposition. It's one thing to present yourself as a conservative. It's another thing to be a conservative. I am a conservative. I don't sell myself for influence, and that's what Newt Gingrich has done.
Are you saying then that Newt Gingrich isn't a real conservative?
Well, that'll be for the voters to decide, but I think if you look at my record, people can go to No Surprises 2012. They'll see the differences in the candidates, but there's really something to take a look at when his organizations have taken in over $100 million just for a year to be an influence peddler in Washington. That's establishment. And that's something that we can't get away from. And I've been the core, consistent fighter for conservative causes.
Now, the Romney campaign is out with a new TV ad in Iowa promoting the fact that Mitt is a quote-unquote conservative businessman, yet his conservative credentials have come into question. Is Mitt a conservative in your opinion?
Well, take a look at who he is, what his record is. He is the governor that put in place the precursor to Obamacare, socialized medicine for Massachusetts. He also has been an advocate for abortion Now he's saying that he's pro-life, and he's also been an advocate for same-sex marriage. He signed 189 same-sex marriage license as governor. But that just begins to scratch the surface of his policies. He's been for TARP, which is the $700 billion bailout. He was also for the global warming initiatives that are extremely expensive and cost taxpayers and also increase the price of energy. So voters will make that decision, but clearly that doesn't sound like a conservative. And I think that's another reason why voters are going to come home and see that I'm their champion.
Earlier this week, Fox's Bret Baier pressed Mitt Romney about past wish-washiness on public policy. Do you think that Romney is a flip-flopper, and if so, why?
Well, clearly he's been on both sides of the issues, on issue after issue, just as Newt Gingrich has been on both sides of a number of issues. Why they flipped, probably for political expediency, but that's what sets us apart. I just came out with my new book, Core of Conviction, which shows, again, I'm 55 years old. For the first 50 years, I was a real person living a real life, building from scratch a successful company, being a tax litigation attorney, raising 23 foster kids in addition to my 5 kids, and also starting the first K-12 charter school in the country. I've been consistent. It hasn't always been politically correct, but I haven't deviated based on political expediency. I fight and I stand true to principle. And wouldn't that be refreshing to have somebody in the White House who we know we can count on, who's going to do what they say and say what they mean?
What about Herman Cain? Should he drop out of the race?
Oh, I'm not going to comment on that. I like Herman Cain. He has a fabulous personality, and he'll have to make that decision.
Okay. Well, you recently made headlines when you stated you wouldn't allow an American embassy in Iran. Your comment raised eyebrows because the U.S. cut ties with Iran 3 decades ago when you're on the House Intelligence Committee. You insist that you did not make a mistake. Can you clarify what it was that you meant?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think it's outrageous when the media does this kind of thing, which is gotcha. An NBC reporter was following us, and over a 2-day period, I talked about this issue 3 times. It was very clear. I know that there's not an American embassy in Iran. They were trying to suggest that I didn't know that, and that's false. It's just another NBC attack, and unfortunately, NBC has been a very willing partner to lift up the Obama administration and tear down any Republican rivals. And I just think it's time to stop. This kind of media bias is just over the top.
Well, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, his show played a crude song during your appearance there. Do you think that the media is guilty of sexism in its treatment of female candidates, you, Hillary Clinton, and Sarah Palin?
Well, I think that, there certainly have been incidents, but I think what happened on that show wasn't the fault of Jimmy Fallon, it was the fault of the band. And I think my point was, had that been Michelle Obama who'd come out on stage rather than Michele Bachmann, I think that the president of NBC would have come crawling and begging forgiveness from Michelle Obama and would have issued an apology. I never heard from the president of NBC. I got a senior vice president, and as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. I've put it to bed. It's just the idea that why is it okay to do this to conservative women, but not to liberal women? And I just think that it doesn't matter what your politics are, you shouldn't demean women. That's what's wrong.
You're saying then that there is a double standard in the media in terms of its treatment of female political candidates, the conservative ones?
Well, I don't think this would have happened to Michelle Obama. I think under any circumstance, and nor would I want it to. It shouldn't. It would be absolutely wrong. You shouldn't demean women, no matter if they're conservative or liberal.
Let's turn to the Middle East. The party formed by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt appears to have taken about 40% of the vote. What threat does this pose to the U.S.? And can you link President Obama's foreign policies to the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood there and the embrace of Sharia law in Libya and Tunisia?
Oh, sure, because already the early comments are that the Muslim Brotherhood and the other radical element parties that do have a certain amount of power, they'll have to form a coalition government if it goes forward once the voting finally concludes. What this means is that they will be embracing Sharia law, which will be a radicalization of Egypt. Egypt has enjoyed a 30-year peace treaty with Israel. We've already seen that the Israeli embassy in Egypt has already been breached. And also, President Obama, never forget, his first interview was with Al Jazeera. And when he went to Cairo, he invited the Muslim Brotherhood to hear a speech, despite President Mubarak, who was trying to keep the Muslim Brotherhood at bay. President Obama has helped to radicalize and bring to power Muslim Brotherhood elements. That's not good for the United States. They are radical, and it doesn't do any good to have a radical organization be more empowered than they were before. This bodes very ill for the best interests of Israel, our greatest ally in the world, and for the United States as well. President Obama has a lot to answer for. He's been a disaster on foreign policy. He's weakened the United States, and he's put us in a position where our citizens could be far more vulnerable, even potentially, to nuclear attacks. As President of the United States, I have more experience currently in national security issues than any of the other candidates because I currently sit on the Intelligence Committee. That we're living in a very dangerous world. And this election will be about jobs and the economy, but I will tell you, my greatest concern right now is with the radicalization of Islamist jihadists. That's my worry, and from day one, I will be prepared as president because, make no mistake about it, the next president of the United States will be tested almost immediately. I'm prepared to meet that test.
What do you think is President Obama's motivation? You just were critical of him and the Muslim Brotherhood. What do you think is his motivation there?
He has a very different philosophical outlook on the world than I think that many Americans have. And his worldview is one that does not embrace American exceptionalism. He doesn't see us as the greatest nation on earth. I do. That's a very different view of the world. I will stand for United States sovereignty, and I'll stand up for the great animating principles of the country. And that's, again, part of my book, Core of Conviction. Those convictions that allowed me to be successful, to come from a middle-class family, to go to below poverty, and then to come out of that to be successful, those are the same principles of our country. And that's what I'll uphold as President of the United States.
Last question real quickly, Representative Bachmann. Recently, your fellow Minnesotan, Norm Coleman, who is backing Mitt Romney, said that he likes you as VP. And so my question to you is, if you don't win the nomination, would you join the ticket as VP if it ensured President Obama's defeat?
Well, I intend to ensure President Obama's defeat by being the nominee of the party and being the first woman president of the United States. I think it's time to have a mom in the White House, and one that has a backbone made out of titanium, who's tough as nails, and who will bring this economy back around and also hold other nations to account. I'll do that as president of the United States.
All right, Representative Michele Bachmann, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the campaign.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.